and thank you for listening in to CLDF Chatter.
To give you a quick overview, CLDF is a national charity which supports families whose child has a childhood liver disease, and as part of the charity we have a young people's service which provides support to 11 to 24-year-olds living with a liver condition. The Young People's Service has an online group called Hive and Hive Plus on Facebook, which enables members to connect online and share experiences. I am the Young People's Digital Engagement Officer at CLDF, Louise.
Today we have Michelle, the Head of Support at CLDF, and we would like to give a warm welcome to Roisin, who is a young person who has been involved and supported by the charity. So, hello Roisin and welcome. Do you want to tell our listeners today about yourself?
So hi, I'm Rosin. I am 21 and I was diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis and primary sclerosing cholangitis between the ages of 8 and 9. I also received a liver transplant at the age of 15 and I'm now at uni studying for a career of being a paramedic.
Did you start to notice signs that you'd got that condition?
So I didn't have any signs or symptoms. It actually came as a complete shock. So celiac disease runs in my family. So we were getting tested for celiac disease, kind of a routine blood test for that. And turns out me, the only girl in my family, ended up having it. All my brothers were negative at the time, typical. But they realised my liver bloods were like completely off the charts. And that's just kind of how we figured it out. And that led to more and more tests. And we ended up getting a diagnosis after that. But it was a complete shock because I wasn't jaundice or anything at the time. So I think we caught it like so early on, which I'm very glad about, because looking back, like I always asked my mum, what happens if I didn't get diagnosed then? And I think the end result would have been I would have just got very, very sick until we found out the root of the problem.
And has it been throughout your journey? Do you find that you were picking up illnesses a little bit more?
Yeah, I think because I was diagnosed with celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition, then I got autoimmune liver disease, and then post-transplant, I then got ulcerative colitis, which is another kind of autoimmune disease as well. They're all interlinked in a way, but it's through my immune system. So I've basically realised my immune system is not the best. So I do pick up bugs and whatnot a wee bit easier. But I think it's just being aware, being smart about it. Like if somebody's not well, try and keep your distance, personal hygiene, washing your hands. Everyone's kind of more clued up to it now because of COVID. But even before then, it was hand sanitizer in your bag at all times. If somebody's not well, you just keep your distance. But because all my friends kind of know, they're all quite, I'm not well, I'm not coming to see you today, that sort of thing. So I think it's just making people aware of that as well.
I was just going to say, did you have to take immunosuppression before your transplant then, if you had autoimmune?
Yeah, so I've always been on immune suppressants, so there wasn't as much of a jump post-transplant. It was just a different cocktail of meds.
Yeah.
But I've been on immune suppressants since my diagnosis.
So, Roisin, you have had a bit of a journey in terms of the fact of your diagnosis and your transplant, and it'd be great to explore that further. So, I have got some quick fire questions for you, so we can go into detail about your journey a little bit further. Which I would like to ask you. Name 5 words that would describe your experience of being transplanted in your teenage years.
Probably worrying. There's always a bit of worrying behind a transplant at any age. Grateful, so grateful to actually receive a liver. Life enhancing, it's always going to change your life. It's going to make it so much better. The relief after such a long wait in the transplant list. It's such a relief to get that call and get the transplant. And then probably uncertainty of the unknown of what lies ahead.
Brilliant.
Yeah, there's some really good words there. I can imagine, obviously, like you said, your journey, obviously being on the transplant list, it is a worrying time. And once you've obviously had your transplant, yeah, relief, such a key word there for the gift of life.
Roisin, what was it like when you were told that you needed a transplant? How did you feel as a young person at that time?
So I just turned 14 when I was told I needed a transplant. And I remember being told when I was first diagnosed, you get told all the kind of worst case scenarios, and the worst case scenario was that in future years you would need a transplant. But I never ever thought like it would get to that point. So yeah, it must have been about the end of 2014, maybe the start of 2015, I was told that my disease has progressed that much that I needed a transplant. I think it was quite a shock, but I vividly remember being in that clinic room, I had my consultants and my nurses there, and I turned round and my mum was really quite upset about it. And I was quite puzzled by that. I was like, why is she upset? But I think it's just at that age I didn't fully know what it meant really. It was quite unknown in the future.
Yeah, did it come quite a shock to yourself then, obviously, because you'd had years of your condition being stable, and then that appointment alone, I guess it wasn't expected.
Yeah, I think I'd had a few points leading up to it where I was quite unwell. We'd tried new medication, we'd juggled about with different sorts of medication, but then it did get to a point where things weren't working. I was jaundiced, I was itchy. But even though I had all those symptoms, I was just kind of in a mentality of, oh, they'll put me on another medication. Everything will be fine. Like, I'm not that ill. Because I was still at school, I was still dancing. I didn't look at myself as being ill. So I was like, oh, I wouldn't need a transplant. So it did come as quite a shock, but it's just something that had to happen, and you just educate yourself with it and deal with it the best you can.
Obviously, seeing your mum quite upset.
Do you feel like you were putting on a brave face when you got the news that you needed a transplant?
I probably was putting on a bit of a brave face looking back, but also I think it was just, I was kind of like numb with the shock of it. I hadn't fully absorbed what I'd been told. And I remember driving home and asking my mum like a list of questions. So what did this mean? How long was I going to be in hospital? When will I get it? And just endless list of questions that even she didn't know the answers to at that point. So I remember we just made a list of questions together for ourselves to go back and ask the consultants, and they were all answered. But yeah, it was just the kind of unpredictability and unknown at that point.
I think that's a really, really good point to make, Roisin, about that sort of not knowing everything at that point, and acknowledging that, and actually then taking a step back and taking a breath and then thinking about the things that you really need to know. Because I think a lot of the time you come out of an appointment like a complete blur, and then it's, can I ask that question? I don't know what that means. I can't really remember what he said. It's all a bit of a haze now, and to feel that you can go back with that list of questions is really, really important. That you and mum knew that you had to sit down and then sort of think about this better, because that shock would send you into a flat spin, and actually you need some time then to think about, right, what does this actually mean for us, and what's going to happen next, and what's going to happen after that. Because I know you can't plan for everything, but at least you know what to expect. So I think that's a really important point to make, that actually you need to give yourself time and then ask those questions that make you feel that you know what the process is going to be. I think that's really key. Thank you for that.
It's usually the way though, isn't it? You'll have an appointment and then you're like, oh, and in most cases, even just general appointments, like, oh, I forgot to ask that. Or it's not until you get home and you sit and think and you're like, hold on, what did I just get told? And I can imagine at 14, I can actually visualise you in the car, going, actually, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's when the clocks start turning and you start processing it and you're like, oh, I do have a question about that, and I have a question about that. Yeah.
And then you didn't realise how many questions actually you do have. Yeah. It's good advice, Roisin. Like, obviously, yeah, go home, think about it, make a list. And then the reassurance is there, like you say, you managed to get another appointment where you could ask all of their questions. Yeah. And obviously at that age, at 14, it is quite a big change. It's a big surgery as well, isn't it? That you need to have as much information that you can possibly get about it. And so how did you feel once you knew, obviously, that you were going on the transplant list? Did you find that getting all that information prior to it was really helpful? Like, what support did you reach out for?
Definitely. Like, I'm a type of person that likes to know everything, like, so I know what's going to happen. I'm organised and I like to plan things, and obviously with a transplant you can't plan that much, but I wanted to kind of know what the process would be like. But also with one of the girls I'm quite close to from CLDF, she went through a transplant just about a year before I did. So everything that kind of she'd gone through, I would go back and ask and be like, right, so this happened, what happens next? What's the kind of next step in the process? I quizzed her every day with a new question. But then also yourself, just yous were always kind of there if I needed support. It was just good to have CLDF there and like my consultants and my friends as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's a good job in one way, I guess, that you managed to find out about CLDF at that point, because sometimes we find people haven't heard, they've had the transplant, but they've not heard of CLDF for that. So at least you managed to find somebody who'd had a transplant before, so you could talk to them. Good to hear, obviously, your story and how you managed that part of your life at the age of 14. Very, very young. So has everything been okay since, Roisin?
Yeah, I had an operation this summer. It was sort of related to my transplant, but I just got it during summer, and we're still got a wee bit of healing to go, but I've been fine since. So it's just learning that like a transplant isn't a cure, it is just a form of treatment, and you will still need treatment kind of after it with medications and potentially off chance of surgery at some point. But yeah,
I think that's a really key point to make, and it's really important that people understand that, Roisin, that a transplant isn't it doesn't solve everything. It's just another set of medications that you have to take and another lifestyle that you have to lead. And there is this, I think, a little bit of a misconception that once you're transplanted, you're cured and everything's good. But actually, it's just another thing that you have to manage, and you have to take medication, and you have to live your life in a certain way to safeguard your new liver. And I think it's really key that young people that have been through this are clear about that, and they make that point, because it doesn't wave a magic wand. It's great that you've got access to that, and things are better now than they've ever been in terms of moving forward after a transplant. But actually, it comes with a huge set of challenges that you guys have to overcome. And I don't think that necessarily you guys are good at sort of telling the world about actually there is another set of challenges that you have to manage. And it's not just oh yeah, I'm better now. Thank you very much. It's really important for us to share that and make sure that people understand that. And the fact that you live these exciting and amazing lives with all of those challenges makes it even more awesome, really.
Well, especially as you're studying in the health sector yourself. So you've gone through your own health surgeries and procedures and all that you're now supporting others, aren't you, that potentially need support on the road. So Roisin, also, I just wanted to touch base. Obviously, you've had your transplant, and I was just wondering, for those young people that are currently on the waiting list or there's talk of transplant, what advice would you give them?
Pack a bag. I used to have a case pre-packed and it lived behind my couch, because the call will come at the most unexpected time. It came a pure random Wednesday morning for me, and that's a Wednesday morning I'll remember for the rest of my life. Just fill your bag with comfy jammies, because you're going to live in them for the next wee while. But just try not to worry about it, and it's easier said than done, but it is so out of control that there's no point in worrying about it, because there's nothing you can do than just put the best plan in place.
What did you find eased your nerves in that time?
I've always turned to dance as a kind of outlook type thing. It's always kind of been my escape from everything, whether it's health related or not. And unfortunately, because I was on the transplant list, I was quite unwell, so I couldn't dance as much as I wanted to. But definitely, if I was ever worried, I would just dance. Simple as that.
Yeah, use your hobby as an escape.
Yeah, so find something that you enjoy, find something you're passionate about, and just focus on that, and try not to focus on your health. I had quite a small hospital room, and it was me and my mum trapped in there for 2 weeks. So you do get on each other's nerves just a little bit. But yeah, music was always going. And as soon as I was up out of bed, I was dancing with my wee drip stand in hand.
And you got your own side room.
Yeah.
That was helpful. Were visitors allowed to come often? And
so I'm in Glasgow, and because I got transplanted in Leeds, like it is quite far from home. So my mum came with me and stayed with me for the full 2 weeks. My friend's dad, who works down that area, he came and dropped off a gift for me, but I was in ICU at the time. I was still fast asleep every minute of every day at that point. So I didn't actually see him, and because I was in ICU, couldn't have visitors in there. But once I was back on the ward and once I was kind of up on my feet and going about a bit more, my dad and my younger brother came down for a few days to see me. So it was really nice to kind of see my family and just have a bit of company.
Yeah, have some time after so long being in hospital, because that's another thing, isn't it? Hospital days can feel quite long when you're sitting there for a while.
Yeah.
So is there anything that you took in to hospital to keep you occupied? Is there anybody that was available in the hospital to come and see you?
So because I was in for quite a while, I'd pre-packed my case with some games, some books, like activity packs. I'm a lover of Sudoku. I did that all day, every day. Find a TV programme that you really enjoy. You'll watch a lot of TV, a lot of movies. But yeah, I spoke to a few people in the ward. I got some boring schoolwork to do, but some days I did do it, some days not so much. But FaceTime will be like your best friend. I used to FaceTime my friends every single day. Every day it was a new person I would FaceTime. But yeah, it keeps you going. And it does help when you're quite far from home as well.
I was going to say, I can imagine obviously the FaceTiming of friends is probably one of the best things to look forward to, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, talking of school, at that time, like how was it managing your education?
So I was in 5th year at school. So that's like your big year, your big exam year, what all your grades are based off of. So it was quite worrying in that sense. I did really well in 4th year with my school, and I really enjoyed school actually, and I was really focused on getting good grades and going to uni and stuff. I had a goal. I wanted to go to uni to do paramedics. That was like my dream and my goal. I wanted to work really hard for that, but then obviously I had 2 weeks in hospital, and then after my transplant I had to isolate for 3 months because your immune system is so low, it's not really safe to kind of go out. My school was so accommodating for sending me work, and they ended up organising one-to-one tutoring for me. So I dropped a lot of subjects. I ended up doing 3, and then I dropped to 2, and just did 2 subjects. So I did still get grades that year, done slightly differently. My school was so accommodating. Anything I wanted, they would kind of bend over backwards to help accommodate it.
That's so brilliant to hear, because obviously we deal with a lot of schools and have lots of different experiences of schools that are amazing, schools that are good, and schools that are not so good at helping young people who are going through really difficult times in terms of transplant or surgery, or not being very well, or not feeling well enough to go to school, and sort of that invisibility of the condition, you know, because you can't really see it. A lot of teachers or a lot of staff aren't very good at understanding it. So it's lovely to know that they were as supportive as they were. And then did you pick up the subjects that you didn't do in 5th year in your 6th year? Did you pick up?
So I did get the opportunity to resit 5th year and kind of redo my year. But at the time, being 15, I was more concerned about who I would sit with at lunchtime. Change years, and I was like, I am not doing that. I want to stay with my friends in my year group. So yeah, I just did all my subjects 6th year. And at the time, in the end, it has worked out fine. I'm now studying for what I want to do. There was kind of doubt once I'd left school. I was like, maybe that wasn't the most ideal thing to do. I could have got more subjects and more grades under my belt if I did redo 5th year, but it's in the past now and it's all worked out in the end. So I went to dance college for 2 years. And then after 2 years there, I ended up getting into uni. So I'm in my 3rd year at uni now.
Did you find, obviously, applying for your next level education for college and uni, has it ever propped up, you know, questions about your grades at that point, or has it been pretty much like, you've got good grades, cool, you've got a place?
I don't think so. I think I was doing my application, and in that you kind of, most applications you need to put in like when you got your grades and stuff, and then you can put in a wee bit about yourself. Because I got all right grades in the end, there was never any questions, I don't think.
Yeah, it's good to hear, because obviously people sometimes get a bit nervous about applying to college, you know, worrying about the impact it might have had on what they could have got. And we're finding a lot more that our young people actually, when they've applied for the next level, it's always been actually like they've either got accepted straight away, or even if they've had that conversation of, oh, actually I went through surgery at that time, it's still been fine and accepted. So it's very rare. I don't think actually in my time actually I've heard that nobody's really got on to what they want to do next, because like you say, there's always another route or another way. I think a lot of young people, even if they have been unable to study at all in what they want to do, they've resorted to looking into further courses, you know, in their own time at home, because there's so many online learning now, isn't there, as well?
Yeah, there's always another avenue to go down and a way to pursue what you want to do.
Yeah.
What age were you when you started university then, Roisin? You slightly older?
I was 19. I was 19 when I started uni. And because of the course that I'm doing, so basically I applied to do my course when I left school. But at the time, only one university in Scotland did it. And I didn't get in. And they basically said, they were like, go get life experience. You're only 17, you're still quite young. And for the course that I'm doing, you do need a bit of just life maturity and life experience because of this sort of stuff you see. So I ended up going to dance college because it's what I love to do. And then I also did a bit of volunteering and other stuff outside of it. And then when I applied again to uni, once more unis opened up the course in Scotland, I applied to Stirling and ended up getting in there.
How are you finding university?
It is good. I'm really enjoying it. It's scary to think that I'm in my last year. I feel like time is just completely flowing in. I think because I went to uni when COVID had hit, it was a bit different. A lot of online learning, so we didn't see people in our course quite as much. But it's just what things have came to nowadays with all this online stuff. But no, it's still really good and I'm really enjoying it.
So did you start your university course actually attending university, and then did it go to online learning, or was it straight into online learning?
No, it was straight into online. So I started post first lockdown.
Yeah, so 2020.
Yeah, so August 2020
Yeah,
I started. So it was
that's right.
after the first lockdown. University is the quickest years of your life. And I was like, oh, this is so slow. Like, all the lectures are online, are boring, but looking back, I'm like, I feel like I started last week. Where has time gone? So if you're in university, enjoy it. It doesn't last forever.
No, and with university, although they say years, actually when you look at the time you're studying, it's normally from like September, isn't it, to like May.
Yeah.
So actually it's some intense months there, but you do tend to have quite a bit of summer, don't you? So like you say, you've had surgery over your summer, haven't you?
My past summer wasn't any beaches abroad or anything. It was stuck in a hospital for a few weeks, but it's meant that I've been able to go into third year, because my other option was to defer my last year, but I wasn't the most keen on that. I was like, no, I want to do this. I chose the option to get surgery during summer. I'm now currently out on placement as part of my uni course, so it's all worked out.
Yeah, and it's not, like you say, not long until you finish now, really, is it? So
in terms of when you've been at university and the fact that you've got, like, you've had a liver transplant and you've obviously got sort of ongoing health issues to monitor and manage, how's the university supported you with that? Did you speak to them about that? Did they understand that you might need some additional help throughout?
Yeah, so my university's been quite good in that sense. So we have occupational health, which does a lot of kind of placement, and if you're fit enough to go out on placement. And when I spoke to them, they were a bit like, all right, okay, this is a new case. But I was just transparent with them. I was just, this is what I'm able to do. There's nothing that I'm not able to do. And they had a few questions, but I think it was more just them learning about my condition and seeing that it wasn't an obstacle that would come into play at all. And then my lecturers, I think because they're all kind of medically trained, they all kind of understand the implications and stuff, but just being upfront and honest about it. And when it came to the point that I did get quite unwell at the end of second year and needed surgery, they were happy to help me put a plan into place.
So have you had any additional support throughout your time at uni that's been needed?
I think the only thing that was different for me was when we went back into lockdown. So after Christmas in 2020, I was due to go out on placement then, but because COVID was quite a high risk at that point, they chose to put me and one other person on my course on a COVID leave of absence. So it meant we just had basically a holiday, but we're meant to study actually. Maybe did less studying than I should have. So I did that for 4 weeks until things kind of calmed down, and then I just did that 4 weeks of placement at the end of the year at the start of the summer, which I was quite happy with, to be honest. But I think that was the only kind of adjustment I needed. But they were very careful, especially with COVID. But yeah, no, I appreciated the help that they kind of offered and the support that was there for me.
That's great. You said that you were really transparent. Did you sort of instigate those conversations immediately once you started university so that people understood, or did you wait till there was a need to have those conversations? What advice would you give other liver young people that are starting university? Is it better to be sort of upfront and honest and tell them about what your condition means rather than waiting for something to happen and then have to have those conversations?
I've always been quite upfront about my condition and my health, but I think for my course I had to be, because we had to get a kind of medical assessment to clear us to go on placement, and obviously it came up in that. So it was, all my lecturers were kind of aware of it, but it just kind of sat in the background because it was stable for all of first year and the majority of second year. But then it meant when things were a bit more difficult and I brought it up to my lecturers, because they already kind of knew of it, it wasn't a complete shock to them. So I think it is probably best to just be upfront about it and just say, this is what my health is like. It is stable, there's no concerns regarding it, but if I was to get unwell, I'll come and let you know, basically.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the advice that we would give. And we understand that sometimes you just don't want to be defined by your liver disease and, you know, having had a transplant and all that. And sometimes you want to just be normal in inverted commas, and that's really understandable. But if you don't sort of have that conversation at the start, then when something does happen or things do get more difficult, it would be a little bit harder to get that support put in place.
Yeah, you don't want it to be a shock if you were to get unwell, but also means if you were to get unwell at a lecture or something in uni, it means they're more aware of the help that they can give you. And it means if you're well and you tell them, they can put a plan in place just in case your health was to deteriorate. So I think it is just the best, and it's only on a need to know basis. You don't need to tell everybody and anyone, just tell the one or two people that need to know.
Great advice.
Good advice. Yes, thank you, Roisin. And during this time, obviously, you've also gone through the process of transitioning into adult services. So obviously being 14, you'd have had that at children's. Is that right? Yeah. And then what age did you transition with your health?
I transitioned until I was 19. I was very late in that sense, because after my transplant, I developed ulcerative colitis, which is completely unrelated. But because my health wasn't stable with that, paediatric held on to me for a bit longer till my health had kind of settled a bit, and then I got transitioned. I found the transition period quite smooth, to be honest. I think any advice I would give to somebody who has transitioned is just find out who to contact if something does go wrong, or if you have any concerns or worries. So who to contact and how to contact them, because I think that's the only main difference I've seen, is there's a lot more people in adults, and it's sometimes quite confusing on, right, okay, this has went wrong, but I don't actually know who I should contact and how the best way to contact them is. So as long as you know who to contact and how to contact them, it just makes it all run a bit smoother.
Does your liver care sit locally in terms of adults rather than with Leeds like some young people would?
So I'm with Glasgow still, and then my kind of transplant care is just in Edinburgh, so it's a lot closer to home. It is better than having to go all the way down to Leeds.
How often are you travelling down to Leeds?
I only ever travelled down for my transplant assessment, my transplant, and then I got rejection 8 months after my transplant. So I went down to Leeds for 3 times in total. And now that I'm up in Glasgow, I've been through to Edinburgh a wee bit more, but I think it's just because I drive, so it's a bit easier to go through to Edinburgh if needed. Whereas before they would just have done a lot more kind of online kind of calls and stuff. But because I can go through to Edinburgh, it's make a wee day trip out of it.
Good excuse to go shopping in Edinburgh.
Most definitely.
I know you've just mentioned that you did go through a patch of rejection. How was that managed? What happened in that time?
So it was about 8 months after my transplant, and I just noticed kind of my eyes had gone a wee bit jaundice. I was just kind of a bit more tired at the time. I noticed it a little bit, but wasn't kind of that concerned about it. I was like, oh, I've just been busy. It's exam season. I've done a lot of like dancing at the weekends. I think I'd came home one day for being out with my friends, and I'd seen my mum and I hadn't seen her in a few days just through work and stuff, and she saw me and took one look at me and she was like, no, we need to contact the hospital now. So I ended up going in, and it was just my liver blood levels were kind of a bit haywire again, and they realised it was a bit of rejection I'd had. So they treated me with a high dose of medication, and then they juggled my medication a wee bit to introduce a new one and lower a level of one. And it is just a bit of a juggling act to see, because everyone's different, find that right level for each individual. It does just take a little bit of time. I was in Glasgow for a few days, and then I went back down to Leeds to the transplant specialists, and then I came back home.
Okay. And yeah, in that time, obviously they've managed to balance it out that it's stable again.
Yeah, and since then it's been all right. Fingers crossed it stays that way.
Good. Yeah.
Totally. Have you ever had any wobbles with taking your medication, or have you just always felt like, well, it's just what I have to do for everything to carry on being okay?
I wouldn't say, like, there is definitely days that I wake up and I'm just like, oh, I cannot be bothered. I just want to be normal. I don't want to have to go out and worry when I need to next take medication. But I've been doing it for so many years, it just kind of becomes a part of life. And I think when I was diagnosed and with my transplant, it's just, I had the mentality of, it is what it is. You just need to learn with it and get on with it, basically. All my friends are quite good that if I'm out and stuff or out for dinner, they're like, oh, Roisin, have you got your meds? They are quite like clued up in that sense, and I'm not fussed about like taking them in front of them and stuff, because I've always been quite open. Because I've got friends that are on the same course as me, they're quite interested in what medications I take and what they do, and they're like, right, why are you on this? So it is educational for them, I guess. But there's definitely times when I was younger, kind of more primary school age, and kind of when your peers wouldn't understand why you had to take so much medication. I was just like, why should I? Why should I be different? And then it's that age when you're going on sleepovers and stuff, and it can be nerve-wracking as well for parents to kind of trust your young child to take your medication.
Absolutely.
I think my mum was probably a bit apprehensive in that sense, but it was just kind of putting the trust in the young person at that time, and also just making everyone aware who has to know.
That's it. And when you were younger taking medication, was that then helped and supported by, was it like teachers, support staff making sure that you were doing it, or did you just kind of have it in your bag? Or
it was only for like a short period of time that I had to take medication at school, and we had like the office ladies and the school nurse, and they were very nice. Like, I wasn't the only one in school that had to take medication, there was a few others, so it was quite good that I wasn't singled out in that way. I remember I used to have to, it was like every Monday I would be late to class because I'd need to go up to the hospital, but we always just kind of like made a joke out of it, that every Monday I'd be late and I'd be like, oh, I slept in once again, guys. Like, look at me. But no, my school's always kind of supported me in that sense. And then when I went to high school, I just kind of took it in my bag, dealt with it myself. I was a bit more self-managed in that sense.
Yeah, oh no, it's good to hear, because some of these experiences of what some people are currently going through. So it's nice to hear, obviously, how you've managed it, and now you're obviously nearly finishing university, so
yeah,
and well on your way.
Really positive to hear it, because I think a lot of young people struggle with exactly what you've just said about why me, and it's not fair. And, you know, there's a lot of young people that maybe aren't taking their medication as they should be. And I think they will come to that point where they understand that actually, like you said, it is what it is. It has to be done. But that doesn't mean that, you know, you're not entitled to feel those on those days that, why did this have to happen to me? You know, none of my friends have to do this. It is so normal to feel that way, but to hear such a positive attitude to Roisin, it just makes all the difference. And, you know, any other young person who's having a little bit of a wobble, to hear what you've got to say will really help them.
So, Roisin, throughout your journey, what have you learnt about yourself?
I think I've probably realised I'm more resilient than I thought I was, because at the time of diagnosis and kind of bad news and stuff, you do get down in your dumps and you are like, why me? But you live through it. So yeah, I think I'm more resilient than I thought I ever would be, but it's just something you learn to live with, and you probably don't give yourself enough praise for how it is, because it's how I know life. I don't really know it pre-diagnosis, so it's just a part of me. I think it's made me learn you do only have one life. And some people are like, you only have one life, you need to live it, and then you only have one life, you need to be careful with it. But I've kind of like mashed the two together, that you only have one life, so do what you really want to do, but be grateful and value it at the same time. And don't get me wrong, every day is not going to be sunshine and rainbows. You're going to have some rubbish days where you feel like it is never going to end, but just lean on those people around you for support, and you will get through it, and you will see better days.
Right now, there you are.
Amazing.
On the road as a paramedic.
As a paramedic, possibly one of the most challenging things that you could choose to do.
It's probably one of the things I'm most proud of myself for, and I'm a type of person, I never look at myself and be like, I've done so well. I'm quite hard on myself, I think, in that sense. But like, I vividly remember being in the back of an ambulance getting blue lighted down to Leeds for my transplant, and the paramedic was sitting in the back, and he asked me, he's like, what do you want to do with your life? What job do you want? And I turned to him, I was like, I want your job. And he was a bit taken aback, and he was like, sorry, what? And I was like, I want to be a paramedic. And he was like, all right, okay. He was like, you do realise it's a lot of work? And I was like, yeah, but I'm going to do it. And I think I got a bit down once I didn't get into uni after I left school, but I'm going to go to dance college, do what I love. I had the best time doing it, but at the end of the day, I'm going to figure out a way to become a paramedic. And T-1 year, I will be a paramedic. Scary to think that just now.
You will be blue lighting someone else down to Leeds.
I know. See, if you find something you want to do, just put your head down and work hard.
That is some amazing advice, Roisin. So thank you.
It's been really insightful, and you've really shown obviously what your journey's been like, and it's lovely that you've been quite honest about that with us, so thank you.
Thank you, Roisin. It's been fabulous getting some time to spend with you. But yeah, it's been amazing.
And your story will help those who are going through transplant, and you've given some great advice about how you dealt with that. So we can't thank you enough, and we can't wait to have you on again in the future. We wish you all the best with your paramedic degree.
Well, thank you for having me.
For those that are listening in, it's lovely that you've joined us on CLDF Chatter. I am the Young People's Officer, so if you do need any support from listening to this podcast, or there's any concerns that you may have or advice that you might need, please do contact us on Hive, our online Facebook group chat, or you could email ypo@childliverdisease.org, or alternatively you can call us on 0121 212 3839, and we look forward to hearing from you.